Hello, Tom Lebecki here with the continuation of the New Theory podcast. And we got lucky, a little bit of hard work. We were able to interview just this week Nathan Lacka, who is one of the top business podcasters in the world. We also had a little fun with the Handy J, who's got close to 800 Instagram followers and is monetizing her small Instagram account to generate over 6 figures a year. Just like any other publication, we want to show some reach. Today's guest is not only any less special, but maybe more special. One, because he's fucking cool. And number two is this guy is a rock star. I will let you know about him. His name is Dan Hyman. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So I talked a little bit with Dan offline prior to, and I said, listen, we need to have this stuff on the podcast. So let's start off with formative years. Where did you grow up? Where did you grow up? What did you, just give us your background.
Yeah, so I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago in a lovely town called Arlington Heights, pretty much the same exact sort of suburb as everywhere else in this country.
Nice.
But, yeah, pretty normal, standard childhood. I guess the one thing that kind of carried over to what I do now is I was always huge into music, whether playing or, attending concerts and stuff, which kind of lends itself to the fact that I interview a lot of musicians now. But, yeah, kind of one thing led to another. And I went to grad school at Northwestern here in the Chicago area where I still live, and majored in journalism and did a little internship at Rolling Stone, and for the last 6 years, I've been a full-time independent freelance writer. So that's kind of the very quick elevator pitch.
Okay, so I love this, and folks, Dan's downplaying. Okay, I'm looking at his website right now. Dan Hyman writes. I don't do research on. I'm probably the opposite of what good journalists do, but I don't research our guests on prior. I don't want to be influenced. I don't want to be, I just want to just react how I am now and go along with it to keep it as genuine as possible. Dude, Dave Chappelle. Wow. Okay. So pre or post craziness?
Oh, this was like only about a month ago.
Whoa.
Yeah, this was pretty crazy. Yeah, it was I interviewed him for the New York Times. Pretty much, timed around. He just did release those 2 Netflix specials.
Wow.
And yeah, it was one of the few things. I think he did one other thing. I think GQ did a story on him maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. But this was really one of the first interviews he has done in a decade or something. So
Correct.
It was pretty fascinating to kind of see where he's at in his life right now. So yeah, that was definitely something I was excited to be doing.
All right, so we go through like kind of the entrepreneurial journey, and the fact that you are a freelancer, if I may call you that, you're really you're really an entrepreneur. You're really an entrepreneur in my mind, right? So
I mean, I'm a business of one. I like to say
a solopreneur, right? So with that said, is New York Times is in the, regardless of we don't get into politics now, but it's the top 1% of all magazines, and then I'm assuming that they have 1,000 writers, paid, non-paid, that would chomp at the bit to do this. So, how does Dan... dude, you're a rock star. I love you, okay? I love you already. You're on the holiday card list already, right? But how the hell did you get this over the 1,500, staff writers?
Yeah, so, I mean, I'd say in my line of work, so much of what it is, I mean, obviously, once you've written for a certain publication or established a relationship, yeah, you have a better chance of them coming to you if they think something's the right fit. But when it's something like Dave Chappelle, exactly like you said, there's a million people on staff that would love to do it. So then it comes down to you're only going to get something like this as a freelancer if you have some sort of inside connection, or if the subject, in this case Dave Chappelle, feels comfortable with the writer. This one is a pretty wild story. I'll try to give it as quick as I can. So
you have as long as you take. That's a beauty podcast.
Okay, so the first story I ever did for the New York Times was 2 years ago, and again, one of these kind of weird things where the only reason I was able to do it is because of connection. So I've long time been a fan of the singer D'Angelo. And again, very similar to Dave Chappelle, coincidentally, he, had been pretty much kind of like a recluse for like a decade and had his own share of issues, drug problems, what have you, and really wasn't doing any interviews. Like, I think, again, like he had done like one thing in the last decade.
Yeah.
Through a relationship I had with his publicist and just kind of like, annoying the shit out of him, being like, well, this was like a month after D'Angelo came out with his comeback album, first in like a decade. I said, he hasn't done any press. Is he going to talk? And he said, well, to be perfectly honest with you, the only way D'Angelo will do an interview is if it's not so much like you interviewing D'Angelo, it's you getting him with his idol. Who that happened to be was a man named Bobby Seale, who's one of the founders of the Black Panther Party.
Whoa.
And so I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. I'm going to get Bobby Seale. To make a long story short, no joke, I Google Bobby Seale, see if the dude has a website. He has this really shoddy website that has some like AOL.com contact email.
Love it.
I sent him the cold email. About an hour later, I get a call from an Oakland number, and it's Bobby Seale.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait, you interviewed the head of the Black Panthers?
So yeah, so basically you can check out this. You can check out this article. What I was able to coordinate was this. I called it like a meeting of the minds of generations because D'Angelo is like very much an activist.
I can't right now.
So yeah, I flew out 2 years ago to like the Oakland, Berkeley area and spent the day with both D'Angelo and Bobby Seale. We kind of drove around to places of significance for the Black Panther Party. This is getting back to Dave Chappelle, I promise.
No, wait, real quick, Dan. I don't mean to. Okay, Hyman, is that a Jewish name?
It is. So okay, I'm this white Jewish guy.
Yeah, white Jewish kid from the Chicago suburbs. Sit down with the Black Panther president. I can't.
I will say, if I always find this funny. People, ask, "Oh, well, who do you write about mostly?" I don't know what it is, but I am a huge rap fan.
Yeah.
Which, whatever. I tend to. I'd say majority of the people I've interviewed in the music world are rappers, and for some reason they seem to like me a lot.
Wow.
I get a lot of good stuff with them. I don't know. Yeah. So it's certainly not always the most natural fit, but it seems to work.
Wow. All right. So I see it on your website, right?
So I spend the day with them. I'll just get real quick to Chappelle.
No, take your time. Yeah, take your time.
So spend the day with them. It goes great. The article is fantastic. But the next day, like just because I'm in the area, D'Angelo's performing a concert. So I go see it, and publicist takes me backstage after just to say goodbye to D'Angelo, basically, and thank him for, the day before. Well, Bobby Seale is back there because they've quickly hit it off, and guess who's back there also? And it's from the Bay Area, is Dave Chappelle.
Oh, shit.
So basically what happened is Dave Chappelle has this, he was told by, D'Angelo's publicist, this is Dan from the New York Times. He basically is the reason you are currently meeting Bobby Seale, who Dave Chappelle idolized as well.
And Bobby Seale's like, you're doing this interview. like the Godfather, no, you got to kind of do it,
Yeah, so basically I just, on a complete whim, 2 years later, 2 months ago, I was like, there's no way he's going to remember me. But, Dave Chappelle has this positive association with my name.
Wow.
I hit up his management and I was like, yeah, I have no idea if he'll remember me, but I kind of helped him meet Bobby Seale. If he's willing to talk with me, I think he might be comfortable. An hour later, she hits me back and it's like, he's down.
All right. I'm sorry, but let's pause for a second. Yeah. Your claim to fame is the positive association with the head of the Black Panthers. I am floored. I love it. I love it. I love it.
That is my claim to fame.
That might be arguably the best story of all. Like, I'm sorry, but I don't know if you should ever tell a story again because you can't beat it. You know what I mean? That's just next level. How is he? Because I know all right, talk about business people. You kind of signed that big contract. Who knows what happened, right? Maybe he flaked out. Maybe he didn't. Went underground, came back, but then as a smart businessman, sold out for the same amount for, I believe, not a ton of new content and maybe some old content that he might have owned.
He was a mastermind. I mean, he basically he even told me he has more than, he taped a handful of stand-up specials or just, stand-up performances over the last couple of years, because he's kind of been consistently touring, even though he seems to be more off the radar. And yeah, he just has these in the can, in a vault, whatever we want to call it. And Netflix came around and is like, we'll give you $60 million to give us 3. So he's 2 were already pre-recorded.
I can't.
And he's working on 1. And I don't know, he's going to tape it sometime this year. So basically, he got $40 million for just handing over a hard drive.
Jesus. Now, so here's my thing with him, right? And he is a genius. Let's call it his comedic genius. Is he a businessman? And don't get me wrong, making $40 million makes him a businessman. But was his motives back then, is he a businessman? Because if he's a businessman, his motivations back then would have been primarily business, which it didn't seem so. So do you think he's a businessman in lieu of all of your body of research?
I would say no, and I would say that actually, which is probably not surprising to you, could be set across the board for a lot of creative types, is that it's, I think none of them, whether you're a stand-up comedian, an actor, musician, necessarily, those successful ones, I should say, the ones who become successful, don't go in with this, naive belief they're going to, strike it rich. I think what happens is once that the money starts coming in and there starts to be suits and managers and executives telling them what they should and shouldn't do financially, they're forced to kind of be more business-minded, but some people just don't take to it. I think with Chappelle, he clearly has a lot. I think he'd be the first to admit a lot of anxiety and a lot of negative associations with fame and attention, which you'd think is hilarious for a stand-up comedian, someone who's putting themselves out there. But I think what happened is it just all became too overwhelming around the success of the Chappelle show. And obviously for us, it's easy to sit here and say you're a complete moron for walking away from, I think, what was it, like $50 million to do another season of his Comedy Central show. Correct. But I think he just couldn't take it anymore. I think by that point he had enough money that it's like, I don't know, he would be the one to answer that. But I think, he just kind of ran away from it. So it's easy to say he's a moron in business, when it comes to business. Obviously, he's the one laughing now with 40 million or 60 million in the bank. But at the time, probably not the best decision.
All right. So you're okay. So you're Dan Hyman. What made Dan Hyman? Because what I'm guessing is you're in the 1%. You just are. In terms of writing, you're in the 1%. I'm looking at your website, the people that you interviewed, where you wrote. The fact that you're a solopreneur and not on a staff actually shows you're a rock star. Because if you were, pretty good, you would be, at one place and you would be there and you'd have a staff salary, maybe some accoutrements, but you're better than that. Not to knock staff people, but what I'm saying is you're just entrepreneurial, right? Whether it's by DNA or by training. But it seems like, how did you get here? So millennials are about the gig economy, right? And we'll get into writing in a second. Yeah. So how did you get here?
So I always, and anyone ever asks me, I say, I don't think any writer or any sane writer would necessarily set out to become a freelancer just because it is such a grind. Yeah. And I think what happened is kind of maybe how it happens for some people, but for me, it was kind of by accident, because you'll enjoy this as well. My first job, so I interned at Rolling Stone. I was 22, and I had to take an unpaid internship. Obviously, I always tell people I had the luxury of coming from a good background that I could take 4 or 5 months to not make a dime and be able to live in New York City. And I'm fully aware of that luxury that I had. Yeah. That being said, that, I quickly realized this wasn't going to turn into a job, at least not as quickly as I wanted. So I took the first job full-time I could get, which was out in LA and was for, wait for it, MySpace. I kid you not. So I worked for MySpace when it was already crumbling to the ground. And basically after about 1.5 years, when I saw they were about to get sold, I'm like, I am not sticking around. This sucks.
Wait, real quick. This is random, but you don't know Paul Armstrong, by the way, do you?
I don't. He was there?
He was at MySpace right before it crumbled, and he's actually a writer for Forbes. But he did say that it was very siloed. Like he was in a random office in LA that wasn't like marked, and it was almost like treated like terrorist cells. So he was saying that not saying MySpace for terrorists,
No,
but he said it was very siloed.
It was so I was like pre Justin Timberlake. This was like I was still owned by News Corp when I was there.
Okay, got it. Okay.
But yeah, it was like we were in a Beverly Hills building. Like it was weird. I mean, the whole thing was very bizarre. Again, I took it because it was the first job. But what happened is, I mean, once I realized that it was dead end, I guess the only thing that came out of it is I was running their music blog, and so like that allowed me to meet like through email, whatever you want to call it, like a lot of people in the industry. When I decided I was going to leave, my wife, or then girlfriend, now wife, was finishing law school in LA. And, you know, as lawyers, they kind of have to make that decision where they want to take the bar exam. And we both are from Chicago, and we never really saw ourselves long-term in LA. So we decided to move back. So I'm moving back unemployed. She has a job lined up as an attorney, but still. And, well, the reason I say that the freelance thing happened by accident is because I come back. The thing is about being a writer is if you're looking for a full-time job, they're pretty much all in New York City, some LA, but Chicago has very few full-time writing gigs. So I'm like thinking, do I have to give up on this dream, start looking for jobs in PR, just kind of doing the whole job hunt thing. But really just to kind of stem the tide, make some money on the side as I'm looking for jobs, I start using some of these connections I had made to pick up a writing assignment, a freelance assignment here or there. It got to the point where I just started to see I was almost making as much money per month as these jobs I was applying for.
Wow.
So, you know, I said, screw it. And my wife, you know, said, let's give it 6 months. I have a job. We're not going to go homeless.
Yeah.
Give it 6 months, see how it is. And it's 6 years later now. Okay.
So there's a lot of key takeaways for people that are starting out, millennials starting out, but also people that have been in the grind too. And we're very, very transparent, right? So here's what I'm gathering. I'm gathering you come from a good family, right? I'm just guessing, right? Not the psychological, but a good family where you had good support. So you're able to kind of dick around Atlantic City, New York City a little bit. Pardon my French, but hang out in New York City a little bit. So your economic needs were not as great, so it didn't put as much stress, right? Then you had a partner that you were able to talk to and be open, right? So marry the right person, right? Hey, wife, this is my dream.
These are all things that you're hitting on that I think a lot of people take for granted, but they're the first thing, coming from a good family, obviously that's out of people's control. But it's so hard. I think that's what's the hardest thing nowadays about getting into something that, you know, a job you want, or, you know, a creative field, is you need to have this time to incubate.
Correct. But so some huge takeaways, right? So let's kind of do like A and B. A is Dan's path, right? Was very fortunate to come from a good family, was able to utilize and appreciate the time, picked the right partner who was supportive, not just even financially, but supported his dream, and then gave you the time to develop and incubate your talent to get where you need to go. Now, we're not all, and I don't want to say lucky because you did choose your wife, so it's not all luck. Let's call it what it is. What do you say to the person who maybe not has as much financial resources but wants to go down the Dan Hyman path? Do they bust tables and raise X amount of dollars, 6 months worth of revenue or income, and then do it? Do they, work full time, do it at night? What does the millennial do who doesn't have a pot to piss in but wants to be on this podcast like Dan Hyman in 6 years?
I think, obviously it was wonderful to have the opportunity to intern at a place like Rolling Stone. And did it get me my first job? It probably helped a lot. I don't think that is why I'm where I am today. So I don't think you necessarily need, if you're a kid in Chicago, you're a kid in any place besides New York, and you want to be a writer, or any entrepreneurial field, I think it's really just about giving yourself that chance and realizing that it's not, I think a common stereotype of millennials is they want everything to happen overnight. Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing, is just realizing it could take a year. It could take a year or two. And like you said, doing what it takes to be able to, stand on your 2 feet, and still at that same time, just not giving a fuck about getting rejected over and over and over again. Because I think one of the things that you need, I'll just use my example as a freelancer, is a strong backbone because, I mean, I couldn't even tell you the number of times that I've either just gotten completely ignored by, in my world, it's editors, people who are, the ones who can give you assignments, or people that I want to work with. And, you just have to realize it's not you. It's either them having a shitty attitude or them just being overworked. But that's just one person among many who would be lucky to work with you. So it's just literally about continuing to pound the pavement, and that's super cliche, but it could not be more true. Because for every one person who gave me an opportunity, there were 20 that either just ignored me or said no. So.
Well, that's correct. So we were looking at the Dave Chappelle interview, and we're highlighting that. But we didn't have you in the bathroom crying after somebody called you like a bad name 100 times over and over, and you're ready to quit. So
or I'll do something like I think it's like one little thing away from the Dave Chappelle type interview happening, and just all completely crumbles. So I mean, it's all just about kind of stemming the tide.
All right. So okay. So this is an interesting time for writers, and it's kind of and having you and I on the phone are probably the two most qualified people to talk about this. And I'll tell you why, and tell you in a second. I have two hats, right? I have New Theory magazine, which I went the staff writer route. I went the $15,000 a month for 3-4 writers. I did the whole content is king. I did the whole quality with content. Write about opinion pieces and spit them out. It crashed my company, actually. That's why I went to podcast out of necessity, because I just don't have the resources, and people actually like podcasting format maybe versus looking at the 100th, opinion piece about why he broke up with you, right? So on one end, I am not willing to pay anybody. I just don't really have the resources to pay for content. And in that case, people are writing for free, and I will say people are actually paying for us to post. Now, here's the bipolar opposite. As a digital marketer, I have money to pay writers if they're a contributor somewhere, if they're a writer somewhere, appropriately. We follow all the FTC guidelines, but what I'm saying is we have the resources on the digital marketing side to say, hey, Dan or whoever, let's do some business, let's come up with a consulting agreement, and let's have you write on your behalf. So it's kind of tale of two cities. And on one end, if you catch the media side of me, I'm going to laugh in your face. I ain't paying anybody. I just don't have the money, nor contributors are a dime a dozen. But in the digital marketing side, a Dan Hyman is gold. So how does somebody new kind of navigate through this? Because you want to write for Business Insider, you want to write for Elite Daily, you want to write for Inc. and Entrepreneur, but it doesn't pay. But the same token, the digital marketers are not going to pay you because you don't write for them. So what do? So you see what I'm saying?
It's obviously. I mean, you obviously hit on kind of a catch-22 there. I mean, the thing is like, I think so. You'll read a lot of articles by people like me, kind of bemoaning the write for free, and in many ways, it's like, would I write for free at this point? Absolutely not.
Correct.
Do I think somebody who has relevant experience should sell themselves short and whore themselves out? No.
Yeah.
That being said, I mean, while I was still in grad school, I wrote for free all the time. I mean, for me, working, trying to get into the music space as far as journalism is concerned, my whole thing was kind of like propositioning people in the sense of like, what can I offer versus you? And for that, in my position, it was get me into a concert and I will review it for you for free.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have the connection. So, I guess, no one will admit this. Obviously you talk about kind of having money on the digital marketing side, and, everyone is very ethically principled, who comes from a journalistic, or thinks they are ethically principled, who comes from a journalism background. So they don't want to at least publicly admit that they are willing to do kind of more branded content, if have you. Or more on the marketing side. I think that you'll find that in just the nature of the times we live in and the toughness it is to make money in the journalism world, more people are going that route. I'll give you an example. For me, and it's a little different, but, when U2 came out with a new album, they're going to send out what they call their bio or a press sheet or a one sheet to everyone in the media.
Yeah.
Well, the publicists are too lazy to do that, so they hire writers like me to write these bios.
Correct.
I do those. They pay well. They are not necessarily quote unquote unbiased or the most ethical, but everyone needs to do what they can to make money. So that's something that I do that I think would fit more in the publicity or marketing sphere, and is maybe not what you sign up for when you think you're going to be some hard-nosed journalist.
Got it. Okay.
I don't know if that answers your question, but I think what it just comes down to, I think the reality is people do have to dip their toes into the more marketing side of things, even if they, in their ideal situation, wish that they could just do the hard-nosed journalism that they would love to do.
Okay. So, you make some great points, and I love your answers because they become like layered, and I have so many questions that, if I had 10 hours, I still probably wouldn't get them out, but we're a very poignant podcast, very poignant show. So, so I get it, right? So we had Nathan Lacka on, and he made millions doing podcasts, millions. He also had some businesses and sold them for millions, but he made millions doing podcasts. And he does have, sponsorships. But I asked him point blank, was he pay for play? Pay for play is very common in the podcast space. So here's how he does it, and I want to run this by you as a journalist. Yeah. He doesn't, and he said it on the podcast, so I'm not saying anything out of school. So he's so big right now that if you reach out to him and you're kind of on the cusp and don't really have that notoriety, you don't pay to be on the show, but you'll pay $500 for a research fee. A research fee is basically like, hey, is Dan worth it? And if Dan's worth it, I'll have you on. But if it's not, you get refunded. Now, really quick, and I'm not justifying, but giving you the background, he's dealing with people that total made $20 billion in capital raised that make annual revenues of $2 billion. So he's like, fuck it, pay me. You want to get on my show, you got to pay. You guys are not notable and you got money, right? Now, I'm not saying he's right, but I'm just presenting how he does it with an application fee, and I guess he kind of skirts, FTC guidelines. Or I'm not saying he's doing anything wrong, but he said it on the show, so I'm not saying anything wrong, right? What are your thoughts about that? Are you good with that, or are you a little, a little uncomfortable, or walk me through it?
I think, given kind of how you set it up with the type of guests he has, do I feel bad about a billionaire paying $500? Of course not. I think the problem is that when you set that sort of precedent or model, and it applies across the board, it's kind of ends up unintentionally becoming a filter and preventing people that really need it in order to be able to get to that next level and succeed financially from having those opportunities to get their name or brand out there. I think the thing is like, it's hard for me to think about that because I just come from a journalism background. It's like a non-issue. It is journalism rule number one that you do not pay for anything. Like, if a brand came to me, I think brands all the time would love to pay for coverage, but they just know that any reputable publication would never even go down that route, to the extent that if I'm writing about anyone, I'll just use a Dave Chappelle as an example, and I need to go out to spend time with him, the New York Times would probably never use me again if they found out that it's like I look at it like college recruiting. Yeah. If I even took a free meal from Dave Chappelle's people, because in that way that would engender me to them and make me feel like I owed them something, in the way of a positive story.
Correct.
So it's just so hard for me to kind of get into that mindset, because I've just been like, it's been beaten into me that, you aren't a real journalist. If you kind of take things, I mean,
okay.
Just one last thing is like, I've gotten offered trips to Vegas and in Europe to like, well, if you get us, if you find an outlet that is willing to cover this new random EDM festival, we'll fly you out, all expenses paid, to Switzerland. And wow. Like, yeah, would I love to take that? Absolutely. But it's just, I I just can't if I want to keep doing what I do.
Okay, so you're staying true. Okay, so we're going to get to the business end, and like the true business end and some details in a second, because this show's really about details and the business end of things. Okay, now, the publishers got smart, though, because what was happening was contributors, not really Dan Hyman's, I'm talking maybe more contributors, run-of-the-mill, were getting paid for posts. And the publishers didn't necessarily have an ethical issue with it. They had a business issue with it. That's how branded content came around. They're like, fuck you. We're going to get this money from the brands and from the digital marketers, and they're going to pay us, and we're going to call it branded content or sponsored content appropriately within the guidelines, and we're going to collect that money because I think a lot of it was they were losing money because people were pay to play, and they were like, listen, we have to do this to survive. But ethically, the ethical firms, which most are, and the real news, not fake news, will put as branded content. But now I don't care about these big publishers. I care about, Dan Hyman Inc. So how are you set up? Are you an LLC? Are you like what's your business setup? If I were to hire you or pay you, how do I pay you?
So I'm set up as an LLC. Shout out my wife for pretty much telling me about that I need to do that. And that's literally, for taxation purposes. Yeah. So LLC is more I'm set up from that to protect myself legally, so that if when you basically are signing a contract with any of these publications, and they get sued for something that you wrote, like Correct. It's on you. So that way, obviously, if I ever got sued, they could only go after my company's assets, which they take my house. Taxation purposes, then there's different routes you can go, but I think I'm set up as like an S corporation. Okay. I'm just a business of one. I like to say, I pay, quarterly estimates as if I was. I am a company. It's just funny. My wife always is getting on me that you have to think more like you're running a business as opposed to just, an employee for someone, because I am my own business, and, I try to set it up that no matter how much I'm making one month to the next, paying myself what I try to do, the same salary every 2 weeks so that it stays consistent. But that's probably one of the hardest challenges I've found of being an independent freelancer.
Okay, so you brought up two good points. Well, many points, but you need an LLC or an S corp or whatever you decide. Most likely an LLC for the smaller writers for two reasons. One, it's better for taxes, and there's advantages to that. But number two is if you get sued, it's just going to be limited to what those assets are, which in writing could happen all the time. They can sue you, they can sue the publisher, and so it helps you there. So that makes sense, right? But now that you are an S corp or an LLC, you're a business, right? So now, but you're a writer. So this is where, I want to kind of rub the conflicts together. Give us your revenue streams, because although you're Dan Hyman, you're great. How do you get your inbound business? And then how do you not, I love you, but I would be like, hey, if Time Magazine needs something great, pay me my money here, there, and there. But I think you can make a killing appropriately within branded content. So give us your different revenue streams. How do you get business? How do you get your inbound business? And then if you're not doing branded content, are you open to it?
And for your first question, I get most of my business at this point by, I guess I'll call it this, I don't think about it this way, soliciting publications or, companies that I've done work for in the past. Obviously, the way it worked for so many years, I kind of looked at it. If you want to look at it the same way you'd look at it as a job, kind of moving up vertically or horizontally, I think that in the writing world, it's kind of, like a stepping stone. So you write for some shitty publication. Okay, well, you can prove you can write. Then the slightly better one will take a chance, so on and so forth. At this point, the reaches, the bigger sort of business I'm trying to get are bigger stories, whether it's a cover story for a magazine or a larger feature, what have you. But it still really does, aside from people sometimes coming to me that work at these publications because of work I've done and saying, I think you'd be good for that, it does still require me to, pitching them, here's an idea, here's why I'd be good for it, et cetera, et cetera. In regard to, so the revenue streams are really based still on, as you referenced before, the gig economy. It's what I'm going to make more money one week to the next. It's just gotten to the point where it's pretty consistent. I'm never not going to make enough. So it's been 6 years. In regards to the branded content thing, it's interesting because, again, it's kind of like I said, it's one of these kind of unspoken things among writers that I don't ask. Other writers I'm friends with don't ask. But I think everyone knows that someone has done that sort of stuff from time to time because the money's good. I mean, let's be honest. I can remember, and I'm not speaking out of line here, Rolling Stone, who I've done tons of work for over the years, does branded content, and they obviously make it blatant. You know what it is. Magazines have been doing advertorials for years.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly. I want to say it was like the best music cities in the country sponsored by, Bacardi or whatever, and they were, I don't remember the exact amount, but it was significantly more money than if I was just doing a normal non-branded article for them. And so the thing that you'll find among writers is, sure, we're willing to do that. Don't put our name on it. Got it.
Okay. So
I think it's just like one of these things that I think everyone knows in this climate you're going to do what you can and what you need to do, but it still has the stigma attached to it that you're kind of, whoring yourself out by doing it. But again, it's like if the money's good, you're going to do it.
Got it. Okay, so now I'm guessing outbound is you'll check out what's cooking, you will pitch editors and or people in your network and say, here's what I got going on. Great, you know what, I'll do it. You have the contract with them, or you set up a contract, get paid per piece or word. I get all that, right? Maybe inbound, I might call you up and say, hey, Dan, I got an assignment for you. You do want to write about this? Okay, here's my budget. Great, we have to accord. So we're on the same page there. Now, what tools do you use? Because, again, what makes this different is we go about the how. What tools, like for example, for me, I use Cision, but because I don't have a network. I use Cision to pitch my clients and our business, because I just don't have that database of people. What tools do you use? And if you don't use tools because because you've been around a while, what tools should people be using that are starting out?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could tell you that I had some sort of complex model or I ever had some sort of complex model. I mean, even though it gets blasted all the time, I got my first internship literally by looking at like the names of the people who worked at Rolling Stone and going on LinkedIn and finding this woman who went to the same grad school that I did, reached out, and one thing led to another. I mean, it's so funny because I literally, even back then, like my way of finding the right people to reach out to was looking through who worked at these publications and literally playing the guessing game with email.
Old school.
I am old school. I wish I could tell you that I used some advanced. I mean, you clearly are way more knowledgeable in this arena than I am. But at this point, it's really, I just know people's emails and just reach out that way. And so many times I get hundreds of press releases and emails, and so I know who represents who. So when I need to get in contact to kind of set something up, I know who to reach out to. But I wish I could give some advice to people that are a little newer to this. I think really what it is just deeply research whatever field you're trying to get into to know who the key power players are. And I think you'd be shocked how open and willing people are to, if only to stroke their own ego, give you a chance to let them mouth off a little bit about what they do, and then they'll remember your name. I think that can't be underestimated.
Okay, so I love it. All right, so now we're going to do a little quick fire before we conclude, if that's okay with you, Dan. You ready to go?
Let's do it.
Best day of your life?
Oh God, I'll give the cliche answer, but I think it's true. I have an 8-month-old son, so
God bless.
When he was born, I think was probably
what's his name?
His name is Isaac.
God bless. Okay. Worst day of your life?
Worst day of my life? Oh, man. God, you're putting me on the spot here. I think the worst day of my life was when I got beaten up when I was in 6th grade, and I just felt like I was a huge loser.
That sucks. All right. Who did you secretly hate who's notable prior to interviewing them? So secretly hate prior to interviewing them.
Oh man, you're gonna get me in trouble here. Oh god, I would have to go with Diplo, the DJ. I think that a lot of these DJs, people have asked me who is the biggest dicks you've interviewed. Across the board, I gotta say these DJs are usually the worst. I mean, some rappers will just give you nothing, but they're not like jerks. But these DJs are just a lot of them are super arrogant, and you know what? I don't want to say I don't blame them. I get why. They're getting a lot of money and attention thrown at them, and I guess they feel like they don't owe anyone anything. But yeah, he always rubbed me the wrong way, and he didn't disappoint in terms of what my preconceived notion of him versus what the reality was.
Love it. All right, old school KRS-One or new school rap? Let's go with.
I love how you're struggling to think of one.
I know that's the scary part. Let's go with Jesus. Who's big? Who's the biggest rapper right now?
I would say Kendrick Lamar, maybe.
Aye, that's rough. Okay, so Kendrick Lamar, new school or old school, just straight up KRS-One.
Yeah, I mean, if you're using an example like Kendrick, I know I'm going to probably break your heart. I'd go with Kendrick. I do love old school rap. I love KRS-One. I mean,
ouch.
Tribe Called Quest probably could be up there, top 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Favorite rappers, rap groups, whatever you want. Q-Tip, I mean, he's a G, but
the other guy died recently, right?
Oh yeah, Phife Dawg. He passed away.
What did he die from?
I mean, there's a lot. Let me be honest. There's a lot of other rappers you could have put that are new that I would have definitely said KRS-One. There's a lot of crap out there, but there's actually rap is one of those things that right now there's some good stuff going on.
Got it. All right. In terms of a Tribe Called Quest, I saw them on New Year's Eve at the Palladium. God, I'm getting old. I think in 96 or something like very long time ago. And
I am jealous. That's like Midnight Marauders era or something.
It was insane. A huge Q-Tip fan. All right. Most money you made in a day?
Oh, man. I'm going to make myself sound poor here. Most money I made in a day? I'd say probably $5,000.
What's the most you lost in a day? Maybe you wrote a piece and somebody fucked you on the payment or whatever. But gambling loss, drug addiction, who knows, right? But what was the most you lost in a day?
I would say probably $2,500 to $3,000.
Ouch! That's a kick.
Yeah, I mean that's something that just fell through. I had written it; it was already supposed to go, and bye.
Hey, last question. Biggest learning as a writer, because I it's great. You're a businessman, you know that, right? But you're a writer too. And I gotta say, probably 2 or 3 years into it, you probably sucked, and now you're getting better because you're getting it right. But your biggest, not financially, but when did you get most fucked as a writer, and what was your biggest learning from it?
I think it was basically getting fucked out of a story where it's everything I had set it up. I had put in all the work. You reach out to the right people, and then somebody who has more experience, more contacts, kind of sweeps in there, and they're like, "Yeah, we'll go with this guy." I think, and what I realized about that is that you can only, I know sounds cheesy, but you really can only control what you can do. There's always going to be people there that are going to try to undercut you, and you kind of have to be the bigger man in the sense that, yes, you want to be cutthroat, you want to do everything in your power to really, make it happen, but when you've kind of done everything you can to showcase why you're the man for the job, why you're the guy to be doing this, if somebody else wants to kind of, undercut you and they want to be the dick, then you know what? You get them next time.
Love it. Dan Hyman, who you need to check out his website, danhymanwrites.com. I could probably have you on for another 2 hours unapologetically. But I was happy to have you on. You are a great guy. Any parting words for our audience?
The last thing, I'll do two little plugs here, because one plug is because I think this is how this got arranged, but randomly, I do some work for Red Bulletin, which is Red Bull's magazine, and I know there's lots of summer music festivals this year, so I put together like 6 best festivals, why you need to go to each. Check that out. And lastly, this Sunday, and I don't know when this is coming out, but Sunday, June 4th, New York Times, I have an article on about this documentary on HBO called If You're Not in the Obit, Eat Breakfast. And it's about all these comedy legends, Mel Brooks, Carl Reiner, Norman Lear. I talked to them all, Seinfeld. It's good stuff. Check it out.
Love it. And I always say, if people are listening this far into it, they either are related to you, either they're actually fucking interested, or you may have to file a restraining order against somebody because they don't fall in the first 2 categories. Dan Hyman, thank you very much.
It was a pleasure. Great talking with you.